Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of your favorite podcast, The Fantasy Birds. Back with normal co-host, Mr. Tom Hickson. Today we got some fantasy buy low, sell high candidates to try to make you feel better, try to get that fantasy team rolling back on tip-top shape. Let's get right into it. We're going to start off with some buy low candidates in fantasy basketball week 8. Let's start off with you at Ja Morant. What do you think? How do you see Ja Morant playing the rest of the way?
Yeah, so I like Ja Morant. I saw him as a guy that could potentially have a really big year coming into the year, and then obviously 2 games in, he has those really good first 2 games. He scores 40 plus and 60 plus in his first 2 games. In his third game, he sprains his ankle and misses a lot of time. Recently came back from that injury, and he's put up decent numbers. Nothing spectacular, but he is averaging about 33 and a half points per night. Solid, especially for probably around where you drafted him, but you probably want a little bit better production out of him. I do think again, the more time he spends, the more minutes he's been able to play and come back after injury. He did play 37 minutes in his most recent game. Compared to other games where he's only playing between 28 and 31 minutes a night. So you're looking for more playing time out of him in the future, and I think you're going to get it. I think that Ja Morant is a guy he'll get more volume and more time on the floor as the season rolls on. So I think now would be a good time to come and scoop him up if you're interested in buying low on some Ja Morant stock.
Totally agree there. I'm looking at Malcolm Brogdon of the Indiana Pacers, averaging around 22.7 assists per game. The last 4 out of the last 6 games, he's actually been under his 22 points per game average. Also, his assist numbers, 3 of the last 5 have been under his 7 assist mark. So Malcolm Brogdon definitely not as big of a name as some other guys in fantasy, but definitely producing like he's a big name so far this season. Last week's been rough, like I said, with those numbers coming down, but I expect Malcolm Brogdon to get it rolling. Along with Malcolm Brogdon, let's look at Drew Holiday and RJ Barrett. Drew Holiday out with COVID, just tested positive today. So he's going to be out for seemingly 2 to 3 weeks, maybe. You can get somebody that needs wins very fast and very soon. Drew Holiday might be a guy you plug in at shooting guard, get you, assists, rebounds, points, steals, you name it. Drew Holiday does it for that Milwaukee Bucks team. RJ Barrett, also a guy, very high minutes because playing with Tom Thibodeau, he plays his starters into the ground. But lately, the efficiency hasn't been there. Points coming down a little bit, rebounds down a little bit too. Look for that to continue. People might be freaked out by Derrick Rose joining the Knicks, but Derrick Rose really isn't that good anymore. Let's be honest. So RJ Barrett's somebody I'm not really shying away from in the coming season. I think he's going to be pretty good down the stretch. What else do you see here?
Yeah, so I first of all, I agree with you. I think if you're an RJ Barrett owner, you shouldn't be too worried about Derrick Rose coming in. If you have any stock invested into Elfrid Payton, or maybe if you're holding Emmanuel Quickly on your bench, guys like that with potential fantasy upside in that Knicks point guard rotation, I think you should be much more concerned if you have stock in one of those two. RJ Barrett should be fine. A guy that I'm going to look at is Michael Porter Jr. And it's always a curious case with him because sometimes he'll miss a random night. His minutes are very sporadic. In his last 3 games, he's played 20 minutes, 34 minutes, and 27 minutes. So you're not really getting anything consistent out of him every night. So why is he a guy that you want to buy low on? Well, I think it's pretty simple. I am a big believer that the Nuggets are trying to ramp up Michael Porter Jr. They're trying to get him some exposure so that they can ramp him up, and then by the end of year 2, at least the end of his second regular season, he can become that scoring option on the wing, as well as look, anytime you have a guy that's that athletic and can give you as much production as he does on the boards and with blocks, he'll give you some steals too. So listen, when you have a guy like that, he'll always be able to give you a baseline of production. So when you have that baseline of production and the way that he plays, you want to see, all right, well, does this guy have upside that he can grow into scoring wise so that he can add scoring in addition to those other stuffs, rebounds, blocks, steals that'll get you that baseline production. So yeah, it's a long-winded way of saying Michael Porter Jr. is a good bet is a good bet to improve on what he's been doing. Jaren Jackson Jr. is another guy that I just want to mention. We had him on buy low last time. However, that was a different update. It looked like he was closer to returning. Now it's going to look like he might even miss a couple more weeks. But again, I think if you're going to push for the playoffs, I think the last 3 weeks of the season or so going into the playoffs, if you have a hole in the bottom of your lineup, Jaren Jackson Jr. could get whip himself back up into shape and be that guy that gives you enough production to slide into that last spot in your lineup. So I think Jaren Jackson Jr. still has upside, but I will mention with a caveat that the most recent update with him hasn't exactly been positive, and so we're gonna keep a close eye on that. The Birds absolutely will, and we'll keep you updated as far as what we hear on him. But as of right now, I still think he's a buy low guy.
No doubt about that. The Birds will keep you updated. Last guy for the buy low list, we're looking at DeMarcus Boogie Cousins, really stepping into a starter role now that Christian Wood is out with that ankle injury for an extended period of time. Boogie Cousins, he's proven when he's starting for this Rockets team, he's putting up numbers, points, rebounds, steals, you name it, he's doing it. First game since Christian Wood's latest injury, only played 25 minutes, but that's due to the Houston Rockets getting blown out by the Charlotte Hornets. Boogie Cousins a big part of this offense, screens on the perimeter, pick and pop with three, and then bullying down low in the paint. So DeMarcus Cousins a guy I like going forward. You can probably get him cheap. He's only averaging around 22, 23 fantasy points, but I think he's more of a 30, 35 kind of guy when he's starting and getting 30, 32 minutes a game for the Houston Rockets team. Let's go move on to our sell high portion of the video, starting with big man, power forward, point forward, Draymond Green. Look, lately it's been really good for Draymond Green. Over 10 assists the last 3 games. Actually, a couple games with 15 assists in each game, playing 36 to 37 minutes per game in these stretches. That's not going to continue. Draymond Green can't play 36, 37 minutes a night anymore. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago when he's competing for championships. Not anymore. Still not putting the ball in the hoop, only averaging 3, 4, 5 points a game. But yeah, those assists are carrying him, and he only averages 7 assists. So those 15 assist games, definitely rising him up in the rankings. Draymond Green, guy I look to get off my team sooner rather than later because those assists are coming down.
Yeah, I agree about Draymond Green. I just think it's clear that the best is behind him, and I think he's a guy that's just probably going to coast through the regular season and at this point, even though he's on a team that probably isn't going to make the playoffs this year the way they've been playing, but that's okay. It's still frustrating for fantasy purposes. I'll talk about Malik Beasley just for a sec. I want to shout out Malik Beasley and how he's just been going off as of the last, or at least going off last night. But he's been really productive over the last couple of weeks, considering what you probably invested in him. If you have Malik Beasley, you either picked him up off of the waiver wire or you drafted him probably in the last 2 rounds of the draft if you got him. So if you did and you were able to help hold on to him, then right now you're feeling pretty good about yourself. 56, 35, 34, 40 are his last 2 games. Those are great if you're able to keep those up long term. Is he going to keep dropping 56 points every night? Probably not, and that's why we're going to have him on the sell high list here. I think he's the type of guy that, he's always going to score, but recently he has been putting up good production in both rebounds and assists recently, which kind of goes against what he's done most of his career in terms of his game. So I think that's another thing that you can use to sell high on. And also Karl Anthony Towns. I think the biggest X factor here is Karl Anthony Towns missing time for the Wolves. D'Angelo Russell has been in and out, but whether D'Angelo Russell has been in and out, Karl Anthony Towns has missed a significant amount of time recently, and he still has yet to return to the court. And in his absence, Malik Beasley has really taken on that scoring load, and is averaging the fact that he's bumped his average up to 30 fantasy points a night just kind of shows how well he's been playing recently, given that he was floating around 23 a few weeks ago. So I mean, he's really been playing well. Shout out to Malik Beasley, but I do think he is a prime sell high candidate. Although I think he does have some fringe starter value going forward. Kyle Lowry is another confusing name because he came back from injury. He missed 2 games with an injury. When he came back, he was really struggling for about 2 or 3 games, and then his next 3 games after that, he exploded, going for at least 48 points in each of them. And then, of course, now he gets hurt again. So it's tough to, he's for a guy that's been so consistent all season. It's been tough. It's been tough not knowing what you're going to get out of him every night. However, he has shown, like I said, I've said it a million times, he has shown that he can be productive whether Fred VanVleet is going off or not. When Fred VanVleet scored 54 points, that was still one of the games that Kyle Lowry had 48 fantasy points himself. So again, there's always going to be value there. I think he's a sell high candidate in terms of, hey, he's had a couple of great games recently. If you can maybe flip that for somebody if you need to make a quick deal. Or I'll say this: I have seen rumors that Kyle Lowry could maybe be on the trading block. I'm not exactly sure yet, but I do think it is at least worth monitoring. If you're trying to have any stock in Kyle Lowry, it's worth monitoring see what the Raptors do in the coming days and weeks about Kyle Lowry on the trading block potentially. I mean, we're not exactly sure about that, but I think it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. With the trade deadline approaching rapidly, it's important that guys that are, rumored to get traded expect how their value is going to progress if they are in fact traded. Kyle Lowry, Bradley Beal, guys like this. If you think their value is going to decrease significantly, definitely a guy that should be on the sell high list. And Kyle Lowry, one of those guys rumored, as you mentioned. Another guy mentioned in trade rumors, Al Horford of the Oklahoma City Thunder, playing extremely well for this team, averaging around 13 and 7 per game in the last 3 games. It's been around 18, 7, and 6 assists. So Al Horford, definitely a guy who's not going to be able to keep up this production, no doubt about it. Also sits back-to-backs. Also probably looking to get traded to a playoff contender and championship contender. And you gotta think that his role on a championship contender is not going to be anywhere near it is for this Thunder team. So Al Horford, very good production lately. Probably trying to get him out the door in the coming weeks if you're a fantasy owner. What do you think about Gary Trent Jr.?
Yeah, Gary Trent Jr. is another classic sell high guy. I think there's some obvious reasons here as to why he's had increased production as of late compared to what he's done for most of the season. But I think it's pretty obvious here, right? CJ McCollum hasn't been playing. Gary Trent has been soaking up most of those minutes in his absence, so he's going to see an increase in volume. That's not going to be sustained as long as McCollum's out, because McCollum's going to resume that role when he comes back. So keep an eye on that if you're a Gary Trent Jr. owner. Also, Gary Trent Jr. had 5 games last week? So 5 games in 1 week of solid production, and it really boosts it. It makes the guy look more like eye candy, right? You think, okay, this is something interesting. Maybe I can use him to fill that last hole in my starting lineup if I'm potentially a contender. So listen, I think there's a lot of things, like I said, with the McCollum injury, and then also him having 5 games of decent production last week is basically the reason why you might want to see if you can find a taker for Gary Trent Jr. Not because he'll fetch you a LeBron James, because he won't, but if you're gonna trade him at his highest value, I think doing so now would be the time.
Yeah, next guy we want to look at is Kemba Walker of the Boston Celtics. He's on the sell high list, not because of his production's been extremely, good lately, but just because he's a very big name. Everyone remembers him from the Charlotte Hornets days where he was flirting with MVP type numbers, I guess you could say, but on this Boston Celtics team, definitely a different player. He's actually scored under 20 points in 3 of the last 4 games. The assists aren't really there anymore for Kemba Walker. If I had Kemba Walker, really kind of similar to a Todd Gurley of the NFL, the knee is just breaking down on him, really not even playing back-to-backs. Kemba Walker, definitely a bigger name than he is value in fantasy basketball. That's why he's on the sell high list. If you can get somebody that's attracted to Kemba Walker's name, in that high value, I definitely would move on from him because I don't think the production is going to be there even as he ramps up coming back from injury.
Is there a minutes restriction on him right now? Do you know?
I don't think he has a minutes restriction, but he is sitting those back to backs, which is going to hurt him in a weekly format.
Yeah.
But just not expecting Kemba Walker to get back to his form, which is why he's on this list. Let's going to move on to Nikola Vucevic, the last guy on our list today, and he's actually rumored to be in these trade negotiations, as we talked about earlier. Boston Celtics top list in the rumors right now, so maybe pairing up for Kemba Walker. But Vucevic absolutely dominating for this Magic team, actually dropping a 40-20 game over the weekend against the Chicago Bulls. But he's the only guy on this team. Aaron Gordon is injured. Markelle Fultz injured. Jonathan Isaac, you name it. This team is battered. This team is not very good anymore with all these injuries. And as they start losing more games, you got to figure Vucevic is going to get frustrated and they might look to move on from him. But look, if he stays on the Magic, he's going to get the volume. He's going to get almost every single touch on offense. It's just if he gets traded to a contender like the Boston Celtics, he's going to play third fiddle to Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kemba Walker. He's going to share touches. So definitely at his best position right now for the Magic. But if he gets traded, his value will come down. But that's going to wrap it up for our buy low, sell high candidates for week 8 of fantasy basketball. We thank you guys for coming out, and we'll see you guys next time with the Fantasy Birds.